This is the overview for Kit 2 Theme E. We're going to be looking at the trigraph UGH and the other graphemes for the phoneme F. The big ideas of this theme are that the trigraph UGH has a number of functions in the English spelling system, one of which is to represent the phoneme F. This theme will explain that the phoneme F can be represented by the graphemes F, PH, or UGH, that words that contain UGH will be of Old English origin, that since we must avoid writing double U's, two U's, in a word of English origin, U plus UGH must always be written as OUGH. To prepare for this theme, you need to first understand that it's mainly about graphemes. And we've done some work with graphemes already, looking at trigraphs and digraphs, recognizing that there are often letter strings which can provide a sound in the English language, that it's not just one sound equals one letter. There's also an opportunity for you to continue developing this idea with your kids. However, I've certainly seen us talk about this now over probably 5 themes. So I'm starting to see this as an opportunity for formative assessment. Where are your students on this? Can they understand this and explain to you why there isn't one-to-one correspondence? If you feel like your kids still aren't seeing this, then this would be some teaching you need to do in order to bring them toward this concept. The other idea is to do something called grapheme analysis, which is where you break apart a word, not based on the letters, but based on the sounds and how they go together. The analysis like this allows you to isolate the phones. So for example, in that example right there, SCREECH, you can easily see when you break it apart this way by graphemes, you can see that the double E go together as one phoneme, and so does the CH. This again helps with the idea that there could be more than one letter to give us that sound that we need in the English language. We need to go back to the idea of initial, medial, and final, which we've done several times. You can do some grapheme analysis even of complex words, but the key is that you break it apart into its base, suffix, and prefix prior to that analysis. And of course, our vowel relationships. Last year we talked about using the vowel hand, A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y, writing the Y in your palm. There's another graphic floating around, which you may have in your rooms, which clearly shows the relationship between the I and the Y. They can be interchanged, and the O and the U. And English is set up that way, and understanding the vowels in that order allows us to know that the neighbor, or in the case of the I and the Y, the upstairs, downstairs partners, they work together. There's a relationship there. There's one last thing, and that would be the Old English origins. We, again, last year did a full lesson on looking at how English is made up of a soup of many different languages. This is worth reminding your kids, and may even be worth a whole pretty good solid lesson, because it was where we started last year. If you're interested in really getting into this a little bit more, page 7 from the old spelling manual, which was the big thick user's guide that Melvin gave us, but in this theme, it's on page 7, you can get more information about etymology, which is essentially all the different places, all the different areas where we took language in order to form today's English language. Often some of our rules only apply to words that are of English origin, Old English origin. So if it's a French word, it's not necessarily going to follow the same rules. It's important for kids to understand that. Getting into the main theme, the common phoneme F often is represented by the letter F. It makes it interesting to understand when, where, and how PH and UGH are used. If you're doing an alphabet chart, if you have something up in your room and you have the letter F, it might be interesting to put the letter F up as a sound and then make sure that you have the alternate ways that we can write the sound F in our English language. The trigraph UGH for F has several functions in the spelling system. Only one of them is to represent F. UGH is not found in initial position. This is an interesting way to sort of get students to come to that conclusion on their own. Have them find words where UGH is used to make the f sound and have them determine the position of that. From this little small set of words that you see here, we can see that UGH is preceded by a vowel letter, apparently by an A or an O. So there's no ROF that says rough. That O somehow has something to do with the UGH being there. When it is representing the F sound, UGH is used in the final position. Draft is one of the only words that we see that that's not the case. And the single letter grapheme O before a UGH can represent both the phonemes heard in cough and tough. It can change in its pronunciation. One question maybe to ask kids, and again, this is good formative assessment from the work we did last year with the Learning from Love theme. Why don't we use a U before the UGH? It's because we don't, in English, put two U's together. We already have what is known as a double U, and so we try to avoid it. Because of that symbiotic relationship between the O and the U and the positioning of the vowels, the next letter that we would grab onto is, if we can't have a U, would be an O. ROUGH is in and of itself a very interesting word for you to analyze because it hits on so many of the concepts that are inside this theme. There's also an opportunity in the theme to work with some bases. You can see them here, and of course homophones, finding homophones for words is always a good place to take this. The word enough, E-N-O-U-G-H, is very unique because it is completely isolated. You can't add affixes or compound words to enough. It's interesting in the fact that we don't have a lot of words that are like that in the English language. Finding some etymological information about that word would be interesting for students, especially in 4th and 5th grade. The word sloth has two pronunciations with two different meanings. It is what is known as a heteronym, I believe, and we'll get into that much more in Kit 6, Theme D. And to be honest, I'm very interested in learning more about that, but I didn't go into it myself personally for this theme, and I don't know that you have to either. We're going to get there, Kit 6, Theme D, but if you have some kids that are interested or want to make some hypotheses or predictions or work with this themselves, then you know where to go. The spelling pair draft and draft, right there, are etymologically connected. You can see how that happens, just like draw there listed, and drawl. They come from Old English and they were shifted. Today, British English remains the D-R-A-U-G-H spelling, where we as Americans spell D-R-A-F-T. However, they're connected and they are both appropriate because we should respect both styles of English. Knowing why one was let go of in one language versus the other, though, you may be able to trace back if you're looking at an etymological dictionary, and students can also maybe make some hypothesis of their own as to why that is the case. Especially if you have speakers in your class who have British English being spoken at home, or they're using some of those spellings. I certainly interchange those. When I grew up overseas, I was taught by teachers that use the British spelling, and so they've become part of my spelling system as well. What confuses me, though, is I know both, and I'm not a strong speller, so sometimes I misspell both, or not these words in particular, but it's a lot to remember. If I didn't realize one was British probably as a kid. So just things to touch on with our students, especially when you see this. This is something to teach into if you see it. There's a fun investigation within this theme, and it's on the word hiccups. Hiccough is the rare spelling of hiccups, although Melvin, through his theme, certainly explains why hiccough is a better way to spell this word. They're both compound words, but we know that meaning in compound words should take precedence over pronunciation, which is how we ensure that we as a school are never telling kids that a word like carpet is a compound word. Each of those meanings has to come together to make a meaning that makes sense within the compound. So for example, hiccups, it's not something we're putting into cups. And so to go with the hic cough etymologically, because it is sort of like a little cough, is a much more accurate spelling of this word. Remember last year when Pete came and we were all sort of stunned to recognize that the dictionary sometimes is wrong. We use it as this, we think of it as being the Bible in some senses, the place where the right answer is. Anytime we can get students to challenge a dictionary, to go after it and base their own findings on their own thinking and hypothesis and what they're doing in etymology and disprove a dictionary, we're going to be giving them power and critical thinking as well as analysis. So this could be something fun for you to challenge students to rewrite a dictionary entry and maybe even put it in your dictionaries the right way. You can see in the theme and I think on this chart why it just makes more sense. Graphing possibilities for initial f, we can have the letter F and the digraph PH, both in initial position. The words that have a PH spelling at the beginning are often of Greek origin. Medial position of a PH is often very difficult to find. There is one exception within this theme that Melvin points out, and it's the word nephew. It is not a Greek word, but it comes from the word, and this would be fun for your students to investigate the connection, the word nepotism, which of course if you give your nephew the job, it comes from that word nepotism. So I thought that was interesting. The final F, the orthographic pattern, this is examined more in Kit 2I, so we'll get there as well. When we use F in the final position, there is a pattern that may result that final F gets doubled. This is another thing for kids that I think is really important because we don't just double some for no reason. There's actually a reason, and that is that if there is just one vowel letter and we're adding a final F at the end, and there's only one letter, we have to double the final F. So you can see from the word stuff there, that's what would happen. Having students make a bank, find other words that do this, or make a hypothesis as to why that happens. If you start with the word stuff and ask them to try to decide why would we double the F here but we don't double the F on another word, they can come to these conclusions for themselves.